You did something wrong, maybe months ago, maybe years. You apologized, or you didn't. Doesn't matter. You still replay it. You still carry it in your chest. You've punished yourself longer and harder than the situation ever required. Marcus Aurelius had a name for what you're doing, and he had a very specific way to stop it. In this video, you'll learn 3 things. First, why self-forgiveness feels impossible, and what you're actually doing when you think you're reflecting. Second, the specific practice Marcus used to account for failure without being consumed by it. Third, the counterintuitive move that ends the guilt loop without pretending what you did didn't matter. Number 3 is the one almost no one applies correctly. Marcus Aurelius made mistakes that cost lives, military decisions that failed, political choices he couldn't undo. He had a son, Commodus, who became one of Rome's most destructive emperors. Marcus saw the signs and didn't stop it. He spent 19 years as the most powerful man in the world, and those 19 years were full of personal failure. He wrote about his own failures across the Meditations, not to perform humility, but because guilt was a real, practical problem he faced daily. He didn't pretend to be above regret. He also didn't let regret run his days. What you're reading in the Meditations isn't philosophy written for an audience. It's a private manual for a man who kept getting things wrong and needed a way to keep moving. What he built, across those 19 years of ruling and failing and ruling again, isn't self-compassion in the soft modern sense. It's a system for what to actually do after you've fallen short. 3 tactics. In order. Tactic 1 is called the correction, not the verdict. When Marcus noted his own failures in the Meditations, his anger, his impatience, his misjudgments, he recorded them as facts to be corrected, not as evidence of his character. That simple move is the foundation of everything that follows. When you replay what you did wrong, you're doing one of 2 things, using the memory as data to learn from, or using it as a verdict on who you are. The first stops, the second doesn't. The difference isn't the memory, it's what you're doing with it. The first loop says, I did something that caused harm. What do I do now? The second loop says, I am the kind of person who does that. Guilt that won't release is almost always the second loop running. It sounds like reflection. It functions like punishment. You've already extracted whatever lesson was available. What's running now isn't reflection, it's punishment. And punishment with no end date, because there's no condition that satisfies it, no achievement undoes it, no apology quiets it, it just runs. Here's what makes this hard to see in yourself. Guilt that stays feels responsible. It feels like you're taking the situation seriously. Stopping feels like letting yourself off the hook. That feeling is exactly what keeps people stuck. Staying guilty isn't the same as taking responsibility. Responsibility is an action. Guilt that lingers past its useful point isn't responsibility. It's self-punishment dressed up to look like it. The Stoics called this excessive grief, the irrational extension of an appropriate response beyond its useful duration. The initial recognition of a wrong, that's the signal working correctly. The loop that runs for months after, that's the signal stuck on, past the point where it's telling you anything new. Think about the last time you replayed something. At any point in those replays, did you learn something new? Did you get a piece of information you didn't have on the 20th replay? Almost never. The loop isn't a search. It's a verdict running on repeat. Once you can see that, you can interrupt it. Here's the practice. Take the thing you can't forgive yourself for. Write 1 sentence, what specifically happened and what it caused. Then write 1 more, what you would do differently. That's the correction. Once you have both sentences, your mind has what it actually needs from this memory. 2 sentences. That's it. Everything after, the replaying, the shame, the tightening in your chest, is the verdict loop. Name it when it starts. Say to yourself, this is verdict. I already have the correction. I don't need to run this again. Marcus believed in short, honest accounting followed by a return to action. The error is data. Once it's logged, move. The second tactic addresses what happens when the loop starts again anyway, because it will. Tactic 2 is called the transaction closed. Marcus wrote, confine yourself to the present. The past is a closed record. You cannot alter it. And a debt, once paid, doesn't require further payment. That sounds obvious. Most people don't apply it because they've never explicitly checked whether their account is actually settled. Here's what's actually happening when guilt stays. You have two debts running at once. The first is real. Something happened, someone was affected, and part of you knows it required a response, an apology, an acknowledgement, a change in behavior. That's a legitimate debt. It needs to be paid. The second debt is the one you keep creating. Every additional day of feeling bad is a new charge on an account that may already be settled. Most people confuse these two. They think that feeling guilty is the payment. It isn't. Guilt is a signal, not a currency. Staying guilty doesn't undo the wrong, it adds suffering on top of it without changing anything. Here's the practical test. Ask yourself honestly, is the guilt pointing at something real that still needs to be done? Or is it running on an account that you've already settled? Most of the time, not all, but most, when guilt has been running for months, the real debt has been paid. What's running is the meter, not the debt. There's a reason guilt keeps running after you've done everything right. The mind doesn't automatically register that a debt has been paid. It only stops when you explicitly close the account. Without that explicit closure, it defaults to open. That's not a character flaw. It's a design feature that kept your ancestors alive. Stay vigilant, don't relax too soon. But it misfires constantly in modern life. Here's the practice. Write down the transaction. What happened, what it required from you. Then ask honestly, have you paid that? Did you apologize? Actually apologize, not hint at it? Did you acknowledge the impact without minimizing it? Did you change the behavior, not just intend to change it? If yes, write transaction closed. Not I feel better. Not I forgive myself. Just transaction closed. The ledger is done. The account doesn't reopen because the feeling hasn't caught up yet. The feeling will follow, but on its own timeline, not when you decide to wait for it. If no, you're not dealing with guilt about the past. You're dealing with something unfinished in the present. Write what's still owed. Be specific. Write when you'll pay it, then pay it. The guilt will stop when the real debt is addressed, not before. Marcus understood ledgers. He governed an empire and tracked obligations carefully. He also understood that an account that continues to accrue charges after settlement isn't moral depth. It's a bookkeeping error. Fix the error. One thing people miss here, transaction closed doesn't mean you've forgotten. You remember. You just aren't charging yourself anymore. The memory stays. The meter stops. That's the distinction Marcus drew between noting a failure in the ledger, which he did constantly, and running it as an open debt. Both exist. Only one of them is accurate. Tactic 3 is called Act First, Feel Second, and this is the one almost no one applies correctly. Most people treat self-forgiveness as an inner process. You do some reflection, you process the feeling, eventually you feel better, and then you're done. Marcus would say that's the wrong sequence. Not wrong in a minor way, fundamentally backwards. He returned to one theme constantly. You are what you do, not what you intend, not what you feel, not what you think about yourself at 2 a.m. What you do. Self-forgiveness in the Stoic model isn't a feeling you generate through enough reflection. It's a pattern you establish through repeated action. The guilt loop runs on a fixed identity. I am someone who did that. One piece of evidence defining the whole story. The way to break it isn't to argue with the evidence. It's to produce competing evidence. You can't out-reason a feeling that's grounded in what you actually did. You can only outact it. This matters more than it sounds. When you're stuck in the guilt loop, the narrative has a single data point. The thing you did wrong. Everything else gets filtered out. The loop treats that one event as the defining fact about you. The only counter to that is a body of evidence pointing in a different direction. Actions, not intentions. Here's the practice. Think about who you were when the thing happened. Now ask, what would a slightly different version of you have done? Not a perfect version. A version that was a little more careful, a little more honest, a little more present. Write down one specific concrete behavior, not a value, a behavior. That version would have paused before speaking. That version would have checked in first. That version would have said the harder thing earlier instead of avoiding it. You now have a behavioral description. Your job isn't to feel like that person, it's to act like that person once today in one small and specific situation. Every time you act from that description, you produce new evidence. The gap between who you were and who you are right now narrows, not because you're performing, but because you're building an actual track record. After enough repetitions, the evidence shifts. That's not self-deception. That's how character actually changes. Marcus knew this. He wrote it in his journal every morning to remind himself before it had become automatic. Don't wait until it feels natural. It won't feel natural at first. The behavior will feel forced, like you're acting. That's fine, that's the point. Marcus forced himself to act with equanimity before he felt equanimous. He acted with patience before patience arrived. The feeling follows the action. That sequence is non-negotiable. Marcus didn't wait to feel like a better emperor before acting like one. He acted first. The feeling adjusted over time. Tonight, write the behavior. One sentence. One specific action. Tomorrow, do it once. Don't wait for the guilt to lift. The guilt doesn't lift first. The action comes first. So when the guilt comes back, and it will, here's what you do. 1. The correction, not the verdict. Write what happened in one sentence. Write what you'd do differently in one sentence. That's the correction. Everything after is verdict. Name it and step out of it. The loop only has power when you don't see it for what it is. 2. The transaction closed. Identify the real debt. Determine honestly whether you've paid it. If yes, write transaction closed. Stop paying a settled account. If no, write what's still owed, schedule it, and pay it. The guilt points at the unfinished item. Deal with the item, not the feeling. 3. Act first, feel second. Write one concrete behavior that belongs to the person you want to be. Do it once today. Don't wait for the guilt to lift before you start. The lift comes after, not before. Start with one, not all three. Pick the one that fits where you are tonight. Try that one first. Here's something worth sitting with. A lot of what you can't forgive yourself for involves other people. Something said, something done, a relationship that didn't recover. The guilt you've been carrying might not be about your own failures at all. It might be about someone else's and the resentment that built up around it. Epictetus had a very specific method for releasing that kind. The kind of resentment that outlasts any apology. I made a video about exactly that. How to let go of an old grudge. Links on screen.